Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to CraterMania. I'm your host, the man they call Crater. And, well, before I get into the show, I just want to apologize to everybody for having to postpone this particular episode so many times over the past couple days. So, originally, I was supposed to have done this yesterday, as I usually do on Thursdays. Well, just yesterday we had some couple different issues. So there was some storms in our area, like tornado watches and stuff like that. So it was kind of scary yesterday as far as weather goes here in Eastern Kentucky. Um, and this also on top of that, even though that stuff kind of moved out of our area, this stupid laptop started having several issues with it. And what it comes down to is I'm gonna have to probably get me a new laptop, folks, so I can continue doing this show on YouTube because I don't know, this one doesn't seem like it's gonna last much longer, unless I get it worked on or something. But that's probably just gonna cost me more money than I want to pay to get it worked on. Um, Also, I had planned to do this tonight, so rescheduled to 9 p.m. and then I postponed it again to 10 p.m. And then postponed it again to 10:30. So I apologize about that again as well. Just I was watching. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was watching WWE SmackDown, and I got really interested in some of the stories they're telling that they're leading into WrestleMania, which will be here in a couple weeks. Um, so yeah, sorry about that. And it's still, SmackDown's still on right now. But I said, I don't want to wait till 11 o'clock. I'm just going to go ahead and start the show. I'll watch like the last 30 minutes of SmackDown uh, after I'm done with the stream. And I'm also missing the last drive-in tonight as well, folks, with Joe Bob. So, and I know that the first movie they were showing tonight is Intruder, and so I'll have to catch the replay for that, I guess, on Sunday or Monday or whenever. Excuse me. So sorry, I just got done drinking this strawberry milkshake from McDonald's. So I must have not got that out of my system yet. So sometimes I'll get choked up after I drink a milkshake for some reason. I don't know. But anyway, let's talk about what we're doing on the show tonight. So, I would like to welcome all of you to a very special week here in my 500 movies in 2025 series. And for this particular episode, which is part one, and part two will be this Sunday. I promise I will do part two on Sunday. I promise you guys that. But tonight, this is part one of my tribute to what I consider the GOAT of comedy, the greatest of all time in comedy. It's the man, the myth, the legend, Jim fucking Carrey. So, and for this episode, this will be movies number 146 through 150 of the 500 movies in 2025. So let's go ahead and start talking about Jim Carrey. So seriously, let's talk about him, because this is for someone like me who grew up glued to the TV. The Especially in the year 1994, this was when Jim Carrey's career really took off. I mean, it was like somebody strapped a rocket to his back and he just went to the moon as far as popularity in Hollywood. Now, I mean, it was truly epic. I mean, this '94 of how this really his career took off, and before '94. So before we talk about 1994, let's talk about before. So, um, I was a fan of Jim Carrey, in, starting probably around the early '90s because I was born in the '80s, and I grew up in the '90s. So I caught little glimpses of him here and there in these really wonderfully cheesy movies that I absolutely love. Uh, you know Nowadays, um, these '80s movies that he was in, like Once Bitten, where he played Mark Kendall, who was this kind of goofy guy who was this prey to a female vampire. And then also, he was in Earth Girls Are Easy, and he was just awesome in that as one of the aliens, along with Damon Wayans and Jeff Goldblum, and Gina Davis is in that as well. That's an absolutely great movie. I love that movie. And like I said, these were just kind of glimpses that I got early on, of him, and just you could tell there was like I could always tell, even as a kid, that there was something truly unique about Jim Carrey. Um, and even at that time when just he was doing those movies in the '80s, or when he was doing in Living Color, I don't think a lot of people really at that time fully grasped what we were witnessing, how the rising of this star, and like I said, in Living Color, that was the thing that really made me a fan of Jim Carrey. And for anyone who missed that this sketch comedy gold mine, um, I think you definitely missed out on when it was airing. Like it was definitely a special time for TV, um, and that show was groundbreaking, and and Jim Carrey was a huge part of the magic of that show. I mean, he wasn't just funny. He was like he was very transformative. Like he would really become these characters, like Fire Marshal Bill, and or Vera DeMilo, the female bodybuilder on In Living Color. Um, there's just so many. Like when he spoofed Informer from the rapper Snow from the '90s. If anybody remembers him, instead of Informer, it was Imposter. And then he also did like a spoof of Vanilla Ice. There's so many memorable sketches from In Living Color involving Jim Carrey, and I mean he was just so committed. He was so hilarious and completely committed to all of those roles on the show. I mean, and it's clear to me now that during that time he was on the show, he was definitely like owning his craft as an actor. And he was pushing a lot of boundaries, which all those people really on the show of In Living Color were, pushing a lot of boundaries and just but Jim Carrey, he just was generally a comedic genius, in the making at that time. And In Living Color could be looked at as kind of like his comedy boot camp, and we the viewers were like lucky recruits witnessing this rise of a star. Um, but now coming back to 1994, 94 was very different. For Jim Carrey and for just people who were fans. It's like everything that we had seen before with the movies in the '80s and Living Color and all that. It feels like all that was just kind of a warm up act for what would become the main event of his career. Suddenly, Jim Carrey wasn't just this funny guy in movies or this kind of like side character on TV or anything. He was the star. I mean, he was the star of that year. But I mean, not just his movies, but just that year. I mean, because he didn't just star in one movie in '94. He starred in three freaking movies in that one year. I mean, think about how crazy that is. I mean, that whole year was like a Jim Carrey phenomenon. I mean, he was definitely revolutionary. He kind of redefined that comedic acting for a whole generation at that time. Um, and he showed us that you could be broad and physical and just really outrageously silly, and still be really talented, and you can captivate audiences all over. I mean, I think he took lessons that he learned while he was doing those like 80s films, and while he's on In Living Color, and he just took all that and just unleashed what he could really do onto the world, in a way that I think changed comedy movies forever, or not just comedy, but just movies in general. Um, and for a lot of people, I think '94 was really the year that a lot of people became fans of Jim Carrey. I mean, I was a fan of him already just because I knew of his previous work before '94, but just because he really took over that year and he was such a star in Hollywood in that year alone, he gained so many fans. Um, and and honestly, just watching his career kind of evolve, since back then, I I mean, it's been incredible. I mean, he's proven time and time again that he's more than just a funny guy. He is a true artist at what he does. And he is he's capable of having these like serious roles as well, where he has this incredible depth and just shows emotion. And man, those early years, the early '90s of his career were just really comedic magic. Um, so thank you, Jim Carrey, for for making my side and my face hurt from laughing so much over the years. I mean, I really do. Like as far as it comes to comedy, I consider this man the greatest of all time. There's no touching him, uh, especially in those early years, in the early '90s. And what better way than to start talking about these movies that he has been a part of in his career, than starting with one of those movies from 1994 that he did, which happens to be my favorite comedy movie of all time. Um, it's not my favorite Jim Carrey movie though, but my favorite Jim Carrey movie is a comedy. So let me clarify what I mean on this. So my favorite comedy movie, or my favorite Jim Carrey movie, which is a comedy, which I will talk about at some point with between this two-part episode. Um, he is seen as really the star, just the main star of that movie. But this movie, Dumb and Dumber, while he is the star of the movie, Jeff Daniels that plays Harry is also the star. So I really think that they're equally as great in this movie. Um, but you know, like I said, that's why don't consider it my favorite Jim Carrey movie. My favorite one that was a main star, and he's without a doubt the main star, is another movie that I'll talk about a little, not on this episode, but on part two. It'll actually end up being the last Jim Carrey movie that I talk about for this in these two parts. So, but anyway, uh, sorry that sounds confusing. I know, but it's just my own logic that I've made up in my head. It probably doesn't even make sense to anybody else but me. But let's talk about this movie. So, um, to me, this is a cinematic comedy masterpiece. I mean, it is a movie that's so unbelievably hilarious. Every time I watch it, I mean, I've watched this movie hundreds of times probably since I was a kid, and it never gets old. it's so funny. Like the jokes never get old. It's just I think, like I said, it's so unbelievably hilarious that this movie should be, as cheesy as it sounds, it should be prescribed by doctors for chronic grumpiness. And this is Dumb and Dumber. Like I said, I'm a huge, and as you probably guessed, I'm a huge Jim Carrey fan. Like, I quote this movie uh, at every opportunity I can get. Um, Same thing with my wife and other people in my family. We all love this movie, and it's definitely a hell of an experience. Um, so from the second that Lloyd Christmas, which is Jim Carrey's character in this, as soon as he comes on screen with that chip tooth grin and that bowl cut hair, I mean you're hooked. And you got Harry Dunn, who's played by Jeff Daniels, um, who is Lloyd's best friend and partner in crime. I mean, he is just pure genius as well in this when it comes to. And the thing is, I think I remember reading a story one time that the studio didn't even want Jeff Daniels uh, in this role, but Jim Carrey fought for him to be in the movie. So I mean, from what I understand, Jim Carrey is the one to thank for Jeff Daniels even being a part of the movie. But I mean, these two together, I mean, they in the movie their characters they're not just dumb, but they literally are dumb and dumber, and just the sheer commitment to their whole cluelessness in the movie is really what makes this movie pure gold when it comes to comedy. I mean, it's not any kind of sophisticated comedy, or this is pure, just like you know, pure unadulterated, like laugh out loud, dumb comedy brilliance. And I know that's kind of like a um, that I know that kind of can't that those two things cancel themselves out, but trust me, I mean this is just like this is that dumb type of humor that I love. I mean, this is just it's genius. It really is. Like you have stuff in the movie like the chili peppers in the burger, and they use the ketchup and the mustard and like to try to like stop the heat. And then, you got the tongue. When Harry sticks his tongue to the pole on the ski lift, or the mockingbird song scene in the van. I mean, seriously, just every time I watch this movie, I mean, I'll laugh my ass off every time just because I love that type of dumb humor. Um, and just Jim Carrey and how he kind of has those like rubber face type expressions. That physical comedy that he brings is like a cartoon that's come to life almost. And I think it's all like cranked up as high as it can go when it comes to Dumb and Dumber, as far as as putting out that type of humor that he does, where it's like I said, he's almost like a cartoon. And because and in this he's like just a tornado just through the whole movie of like all these hilarious moments. And just I mean it really it's just amazing to me, to how awesome this movie is. And Jeff Daniels, he is, I think he was really like perfect for that role. And just and he kind of uh what's the word I'm looking for? He kind of, is the contrast, I guess, to like Carrie's kind of manic energy with that kind of lovable, um, that lovable character that Harry plays, and their chemistry is amazing in this. So if you're looking for any kind of some deep meaning and profound life lessons, you're in the wrong place with this movie. But if you want, you just kind of turn off your brain for a while and just kind of embrace a little bit of absurdity and just laugh until your sides hurt. I think Dumb and Dumber is the choice to make here because it is. I think it is the perfect antidote to a bad day. And it's a movie that I can watch again and again and just still laugh every time. Um, if you haven't seen this before, please turn off this video now and go watch it. Because before I start talking about the movie, because I will be going into the movie in detail. But yeah, this is definitely a movie. If you enjoy comedy, this is definitely one of the top ones that is required to watch. Um, so I would definitely recommend this, like I said, to anybody. So let's go ahead and talk about the comedic geniuses behind Dumb and Dumber before we start talking about the movie. So the Farrelly brothers, Peter and Bobby Farrelly, they wrote and directed this beautiful piece of cinema, uh, and these guys really deserve a medal. I think for this movie, they definitely understood the they understood the assignment of making us laugh and making us laugh hard, and just kind of make us laugh about things that we probably shouldn't be laughing at, like Billy the blind kid. I mean, we'll get into that though. You know, I think the Farrelly brothers they truly understood that power of dumb humor, and they just unleashed that upon the world with this movie. And so thank you, Farrelly brothers, for this movie. Um, but so Dumb and Dumber, the story of Dumb and Dumber is very delightfully convoluted. As Lloyd and Harry's, we start we start in Providence, Rhode Island, where we meet Lloyd, who's this limo driver with more enthusiasm than he does his brain cells, and then his best friend Harry Dunn, who is this dog groomer, who's kind of equally as challenged as Lloyd, and like I said, Harry, who is this dog groomer, he has also transformed his van into this giant sheepdog. So anyway, Lloyd, at the beginning of the movie, in this moment of kind of love at first sight, um, he becomes completely smitten with this lady that he picks up, who is the beautiful Mary Swanson, and she's heading to Aspen, and she accidentally leaves this briefcase, at the airport, and which in this briefcase is packed with ransom money for her kidnapped husband. So Lloyd, bless his heart, uh, and his kind of infinite, dim-wittedness, if that's even a word, he thinks he's doing this noble deed by trying to return the briefcase. So of course, all this chaos, ensues when he misses her plane in this kind of you know spectacular, hilarious fashion. Um, and add an insult to injury. Lloyd gets fired for causing a scene at the airport, and he goes home only to find Harry has also been fired from his job, and because of all the dogs that he had in his van, he was supposed to be taken to like a dog show, and he stopped and picked up like these hot dogs and different foods and stuff for these dogs to eat. And then like when he arrived at the dog show, all the dogs were like covered in ketchup and mustard and all this, and so that's the reason that he got fired from his job. Um, now next up, enter the bad guys of the movie, which is the, the bigger guy's name. I think his like nickname is Mental. I don't know if they ever gave his real name in the movie, but like they call him Mental, and his female partner Shay, who and they're the ones that are trying to come after Lloyd because he because he has the ransom money. And so they visit Lloyd and Harry, but our heroes here in their kind of infinite wisdom um, mistake them for like debt collectors. And Lloyd's like, "Did you pay the gas bill?" So they think they're like debt collectors, and so they make this escape out of the apartment, and so they return home later after I guess looking for jobs and all that. And when they come back into the apartment, they discover that the tragic fate of Harry's parakeet, Petey, is has been killed, and his head's been twisted off. So um, this kind of causes this whole almost like an argument between the two, um, and so they decide to go and like Lloyd comes up with this plan is that they're going to go to Aspen to try to find Mary to return a briefcase. And at first, Harry is kind of reluctant to do this, but then he finally gives in and agrees because he feels sorry for Lloyd. Um, so, like I said, Lloyd, he's the mastermind of this operation. Convinces Harry that returning Mary's briefcase is the right thing to do. Thus begins this kind of epic road trip, I guess, to Aspen in Harry's uh, sheepdog van. So along the way, they end up picking up a hitchhiker who is mental. The guy not like mental, but he's the that's the guy's name, and like this mental and Shay, even though they don't pick up Shay, um, they are in cahoots with this guy named Nicholas Andre, who is this the real villain behind the kidnapping of Mary's husband, and and they're supposed to retrieve the briefcase for him. Um, so this road trip is kind of like a masterpiece in comedic torture for the character of Mental. Um, so Lloyd and Harry's kind of like they have these very childish antics. They end up driving Mental absolutely nuts. Mental. They drive it. They drive Mental. So this they end up stopping for lunch, and he plans to poison Lloyd and Harry, with rat poison. But in this kind of twist of fate that that only this movie could deliver, Lloyd and Harry end up pranking him first and put all these really hot chili peppers on his burger. So Mental, who's already suffering from this ulcer, he starts becoming agony where he can't breathe, and it's kind of very comedic blunder. I mean, Lloyd and Harry they mistake Mental's poison pills for his actual medication, and so they feed him this rat poison. And well, let's just say Mental's road trip ends abruptly in that moment and permanently. Um, and Lloyd and Harry are like, check please, and then they head out of there, and they're trying to like put together their thoughts of what just happened. But they continue their journey on to try to get to Aspen. Um, so along the way, they do stop at this gas station, and Harry in his kind of own special way tries to woo this this chick that's at the gas station, and who says she's also heading to Aspen as well, and her name is Beth. So um, they also run into Seabass at this gas, which I forgot to mention. Seabass was this guy that was at um, a restaurant that they stopped at and ate, um, and they pulled a trick on this guy Seabass and his friends into paying for their food. So along the way, like I said, they stop at this gas station, and Seabass is the one that ends up at in this stall or in this bathroom of the gas station where Lloyd is. And he comes into the same stall that Lloyd is, and this kind of almost leads to this, um, well, sexual assault on Lloyd from Seabass, and Harry, inadvertently saves Lloyd from this because minutes prior to this situation between Lloyd and Seabass, Harry was talking to Beth out there, and he accidentally set his leg on fire because he accidentally got gas on it, and then as he was like he had a match and he lit Beth's cigarette and he threw the match down and his leg catches on fire. Um, and if you've not seen the movie and you're still watching this, I'm sorry if I'm giving stuff away, guys, um, but I mean, it's just you were given a chance, to watch this movie. But I'm like I said, so I'm gonna carry on now with that, and but beyond after Harry saves Lloyd from Seabass stuff, they go. They get back on this trip towards Aspen, and the police are on their trail at this point. But thanks to Lloyd's kind of not he was having these kind of like daydreams, and he's just really bad navigational skills. um, they end up driving all night and into Nebraska, so they completely missed the exit heading towards Aspen, um, which is in Colorado, I'm pretty sure. And Harry, understandably, once he figures out they're in Nebraska, um, which which in that scene has one of my favorite jokes in the whole movie, where he says something like, "Man, I thought the Rockies were a lot rockier than this," or something like that, and and Lloyd says, "Yeah, that John Denver was full of shit, man." And that's one of my favorite jokes in the whole movie. But like, understandably, Harry is upset and he wants to just give up once he realizes they're in Nebraska. And Lloyd, who kind of has this huge amount of optimism about him, or sheer delusion, any way you want to look at it. He ends up convincing Harry to continue on to Aspen after Lloyd trades in the sheepdog van for this little mini bike. Um, and this is what convinces Harry to think that Lloyd has redeemed himself, and they continue on this journey towards Aspen. So they make their they make their way back, even though they went 5 hours out of the way. They make their way back and on the right path to Aspen, and miraculously they finally arrive. But they find that finding Mary when they get there proves to be a little bit trickier than what they anticipated. So this kind of frustration boils over, and Harry ends up attacking Lloyd, and amongst this little brawl or tussle, whatever you want to call it, um, they accidentally break open the briefcase, and they see all this money in the briefcase. And do they return it immediately? Nope. Of course not. So what they do is what I think any sensible person would probably do, especially nowadays if they were to find a briefcase full of money, is just to blow it all on a fancy hotel and ridiculous outfits and fucking Lamborghini and just all kinds of shit that they spent this money on. It's crazy. Um, so while they're staying in this big luxurious hotel, um, they are reading the paper and they find out that Mary is hosting this local charity gala, and so Lloyd, being very nervous, gets Harry to approach Mary for him when they go to this gala. And Harry naturally kind of takes the opportunity to score this kind of date with Mary at this ski lodge, and so he ends up lying to Lloyd that that he's setting up the date for Lloyd, when in fact, he set this date up for himself. And while Harry's out there having the time of his life on the date on the slopes with Mary, um, Lloyd just waits at this hotel bar and waits for Mary, and then that's when Beth, who we previously met at the gas station, is at the bar with Lloyd, and so and she's talking, like Lloyd gets annoyed with her and everything, and um, so the bartender ends up telling Lloyd like that he knows Mary and he knows where she lives and all that. So Lloyd, ends up going to her house, and when he gets to her house, he discovers that she's there with Harry, and of course Lloyd feels betrayed at this point. So, but to Lloyd, revenge is a dish best served with laxatives. So, um, that night before Harry goes out on town, he doesn't tell Lloyd where he's going, but at this point, Lloyd pretty sure he knows where Harry's going. So he makes him like I think it's a coffee or hot cocoa or something for Harry, and he just pours like an entire bottle of laxatives in it. And as Harry arrives to pick up Mary for their date, um, let's say it take his stomach takes a turn for the worst, and this very explosive and bathroom disaster at Mary's house. So meanwhile, Lloyd arrives at Mary's house as well and reintroduces himself to Mary, and he takes her back to their hotel to return the briefcase, and this is where he also he confesses his love for Mary. I mean, which is very brave on his part, and but of course, she politely but firmly rejects him, and and he says like he says one of his like chances like 1 out of 100, and she's like 1 out of 1 million, and he's like, so you're telling me there's a chance? So, and like I said, there's so many things at this throughout this movie that I can just quote, and I'll quote on a regular basis, just because I love it so much. And but anyway, beyond that point in the movie, just when things couldn't get any dumber or dramatic, however you want to look at it, Nicholas shows up, the bad guy in the movie, and he's got both Mary and Lloyd held at gunpoint, and it turns out he's the mastermind, behind Mary's husband Bobby's kidnapping. Well, we knew that, earlier in the movie, but this is the reveal to both Mary and Lloyd, that he's behind on this, and then he ends up getting furious to find out that there is no money now, that Lloyd and Harry have spent all that money, and as Lloyd says, that is just as good as money, sir. Those are IOUs. And at this point, he's fed up, so he handcuffs Mary and Lloyd to the bed, and then Harry shows up and ends up getting shot. But thankfully, Beth, that we were introduced to earlier in the film, turns out she's not just some pretty face and some ordinary woman that's visiting Aspen, but she's actually this undercover FBI agent who gave Harry this bulletproof vest and a gun. So Harry plays dead at first, and very badly, and then he just inevitably returns to life, and he starts firing at him, and he misses every shot. Um, so at this point, the FBI bursts in, and Beth leading the charge, and so Nicholas and Shay are arrested, and Mary and her husband Bobby are reunited, and of course Lloyd is heartbroken. Harry too, I guess. Even though I mean, like it was such a it was a weird situation, but I mean, like there's so much that in this movie, like there's so much that I didn't even talk scenes that I didn't even talk about. But because if I were to talk about every aspect of this movie, and I would, but it would just take me so long. Um, what's going on, Daniel? Glad to have you here, man. Just talking about Dumb and Dumber right now, man. Um, but like I said, yeah, I mean, like, I love this movie so much, and it would just take me so long to talk about every aspect of the movie that I'd want to talk about. I mean, I would literally talk about every scene, and and I may do that one day. I may watch this movie again one day for the channel and just do a scene by scene breakdown for the entire movie if that's something you guys would be interested in. Um, but like I said, at the end of this movie, this epic journey, this love quest, this everything, is just kind of rendered pointless in the end for these characters, and just all these things that they bought with the money or confiscated by the police, and then their mini bike is broken. Um, and Lloyd and Harry just, they start this kind of long, sad walk back to Rhode Island. But wait, there's more. So there is a bus that ends up pulling up full of these bikini models who are on tour. Um, and they're needing two oil boys. Uh, so is this Lloyd and Harry's break? Nope. So Lloyd and Harry, and they're kind of, that they completely misunderstand what's being offered to them here, and they reject it. And they point them in the direction of a town where they'll find, two guys to take up this job. Um, and Harry, who's ever the optimist of these two characters, or just dumb, he reassures Lloyd that they'll get their break one day, and then, they walk off into the sunset or just back towards Rhode Island, whatever. They just play this kind of game of tag, and that's the end. But or is it? So because we did get a prequel for this movie and a follow up sequel, but the sequel didn't come until many years later. So and uh, those movies I like those movies. I like the prequel and I do like the sequel to Dumb and Dumber, but they neither had the kind of impact that the original film did. And and this movie is not just a movie to me. I mean, I think it is a cultural phenomenon. I mean, it really cemented its place, in comedic history, and I think it just continues to be beloved by generations of fans. Um, and just this was one of Jim Carrey's breakout roles in that year of '94. I mean, because this movie, along with Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and The Mask, they, like I said, they were all released in that same year, and that just catapulted Jim Carrey into superstardom. Dumb and Dumber showcased just this Jim Carrey's very unique brand of like manic and physical comedy to this massive audience, and just proved that his box office draw was there, and Lloyd just became this. Lloyd Christmas became this instantly like iconic character, I think. And just there's so many quotable lines in this movie. The another one of my favorites is the big gulps, huh? All right. Well, see you later. And I for no reason at all, I quote that line all the time to my wife. And but yeah, there's so many quotable lines. The movie is packed with them, and for some people like myself, like I said, that a lot of these lines have kind of seeped into everyday language and just also pop culture references and stuff. So, I mean, there's so many things out there that you can find that quote Dumb and Dumber, and it's just it's amazing. Um, just the whole slapstick comedy in this as well is just definitely embraced, and it's just at this point in time, it was the type of humor that really hadn't been mainstream for a while. Um, and I think it reintroduced a whole new generation to that kind of joy of simple and like visual, like over the top silliness, including myself because it's '94. I was a kid at the time. I was maybe like 7, 8 years old when this movie came out. And I think that this movie is one of the reasons why I love that dumb type of humor and that very simple, humor and slapstick comedy. It's it definitely changed me, and I guess, well, formed me into the fan that I am. I guess you should say. Um, it just proves that that sometimes dumb jokes are the funniest. Um, and just the buddy comedy gold here. I mean, between Lloyd and Harry is just one of, I think, they're one of movies' greatest comedic duos. Um, just they have these very contrasting personalities, or lack thereof, whichever you want to look at it. Um, just they have this loyalty to one another and this chemistry with one another that really makes them very entertaining to watch. Um, I think that Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels were just they were made for these roles, and they set a really high bar for for buddy comedies that followed this. Um, and to go back and talk a little bit more about the Farrelly brothers, this was a huge success for them as well, and it just really established them as these kind of masters of like gross out, but ultimately like good hearted comedy, and it just paved the way for future movie hits like Kingpin and uh, there's something about Mary and Me, Myself, and Irene, another Jim Carrey movie. Um, and decades later, I think Dumb and Dumber, still holds up. It's a timeless comedy. I think that that really transcends generations. Um, it's simple. It's very relatable in a lot of ways. I mean, because we've all felt a little dumb sometimes. We've done dumb stuff, and I just think it's just sheer, you know, absurdity when that really makes it rewatchable over and over. Um, and as I stated before, the movie's popularity led to a prequel and that the sequel, which came way after the original film. Um, like I said, they definitely didn't reach the heights of the original film, but those movies still provided some laughs for me at least. But I just think that by making that prequel and by making that sequel, that this movie shows that lasting appeal of those characters and just that whole world that the Farrelly brothers have created. Um, but in conclusion, I guess this movie Dumb and Dumber is more than just a dumb comedy to me. It's a beloved classic for me. It just I think it is a testament to the power of just pure silliness in movies. And it's just a movie that's made me laugh until I've cried. Uh, and just, I quote lines from this movie all the time. And it just, it goes to show that, even the dumbest guys in the world, you know, need a break every once in a while. And, um, for all of that this movie has given, I'm eternally grateful for it. Um, but yeah, that's Dumb and Dumber. That's my favorite comedy in the world, in of all time, and it's definitely hard to beat. And Brand, you said that you agree that Dumb and Dumber is the perfect comedy. Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. I mean, it's just um, it's dumb humor, but it's so clever. It's so genius how it's pulled off. Um, I don't think I know you were telling me about someone. that you knew that, or someone had said that they didn't they didn't like the movie or something. But I'm I find that hard to believe. I feel like that's just somebody saying that just to try to make themselves look cool or something. Because literally, I mean, how could you not like Dumb and Dumber? It's amazing. But I guess moving on to the next Jim Carrey masterpiece, which is another movie that he did in the year 1994. Um, I mean, and this one, I think this is one of my wife's favorite Jim Carrey movies. And from the moment that I saw this movie when I was a kid, I loved it too. I mean, as a kid watching this movie, it's very hard for you to not be entertained as a kid, just because there is all this very manic energy, this cartoon chaos. There's a lot of quotable stuff in this as well, as there is in about every Jim Carrey movie. About every Jim Carrey movie is very quotable, but this one, is all pure gold. And and let's be real. It's really all thanks to Jim Carrey. Um, in this role. I mean, that this movie was so successful and the worked the way it did. Um, because, and this is The Mask, by the way. Sorry if I hadn't mentioned the name yet, but this is The Mask from 1994 as well. And this film showcases everything that makes Jim Carrey a comedic legend. Because he has these rubber face, expressions, and just the voice acting that where he kind of bounces from Stanley Ipkiss to the mask, just kind of like in a split second. I mean, it's just wonderfully, and very masterful in just that comedic aspect. I mean, just seriously, nobody else could have played this role, in my opinion. Um, and for those who somehow haven't been blessed to watch The Mask, let me give you a rundown. So, this movie was brought to life by director Chuck Russell, um, who was previously known for working on horror films like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors, and the Blob remake from '88. And he took this movie, which was based on this kind of darker, grittier, Dark Horse comic book series. This was actually a comic book series before it was a movie. And but Chuck Russell, he took that comic and just kind of throws us into um, this very amazing movie of The Mask, and and it's all uh, based in this city called Edge City. So, um, our hero here, if you can call him that at first, is Stanley Ipkiss, who's played by Jim Carrey, obviously. Um, and he's, he's your classic kind of lovable loser. He's very sweet, kind of insecure, bank teller who is constantly like walked all over by everyone, from his landlady to just random strangers. And his only friend, who is this guy named Charlie, he tries to cheer him up all the time, but Stanley's life is pretty much kind of this just very boring existence, and things start to thankfully get interesting for Stanley when this very stunning and sultry Tina Carlisle, who's played by Cameron Diaz in this movie, and this was like Cameron Diaz's breakout role, I'm pretty sure. She walks into the bank, and Stanley is instantly just smitten with her, and who wouldn't be? Because Cameron Diaz was a smoke show at this time in the '90s, and she seems to kind of return that interest for Stanley in this moment. Though little does Stanley know, Tina's actually just casing the joint or the bank. I don't know why I call it the joint, but it's talking like a gangster head casing the joint. See, but So Tina, like I said, Tina's like just she's kind of scoping out the bank for this sleazy gangster named Dorian, who is played by Peter Green, and after this kind of disastrous night where Stanley gets rejected from the Coco Bongo nightclub where Tina's a singer at, by the way, and this kind of clunker loaner car that's given to him breaks down, on the bridge as he's going home, and he just kind of feels very defeated, and he tries to, well, you think he's going to jump off the bridge or something like that and kill himself, but instead he finds something that he sees in the water, and it's not a fish, it's not treasure, but it's this really creepy wooden mask. Um, and being Stanley, and let's be honest, I mean, I think all of us would be very curious about something like that as well. Um, he takes the mask and he puts it on, and then boom, it's transformation time from there, and suddenly Stanley is no more. He becomes this whirlwind, cartoonish character known as the Mask, and he's got green face, zoot suit wearing. He's just this kind of this almost like the powers of a Looney Tunes character on steroids. Um, he can stretch himself out. He can morph into different shapes and sizes. He pulls out hammers and mallets from thin air. Just basically just anything his cartoonish kind of imagination can conjure up, and man, it's something else. I mean, this night kind of turns for this night for him turns into this hilarious like rampage of just revenge against everyone who's ever wronged Stanley. From the car mechanics to Agnes, his landlady. Um, and it's all done with this kind of really classic over the top Jim Carrey energy, and it's just so hilarious. And the next day, the cops they're led by this Detective Calloway, and also this not kind of nosy reporter Peggy, um, who's played by Amy Yesbeck, who was John Ritter's wife, and they're kind of they're hot on the Mask's trail, and Stanley, who is now addicted to that kind of confidence boost that he was given, that where as the Mask he ends up putting it on again to rob this bank, um, which is, to him, it's a good reason, he needed to kind of cash out to go see Tina at this nightclub. And in this kind of perfect comedic twist, he accidentally foils Dorian's actual bank robbery in the whole process. Um, so that night at the Coco Bongo nightclub, Stanley, as the Mask, finally goes and he gets to see Tina sing and all this, and then he takes this opportunity to kind of show himself off to the audience there in the nightclub, and he dances with Tina, and their whole dance scene is really iconic, I think, for this movie. And he even gets a kiss from her, as the Mask. But all these things really go south when Dorian ends up confronting him, and Stanley has to kind of make this very quick exit, and he leaves behind a clue, a scrap of this pajama fabric, or is it, or like a tie? It's like they shoot at him, and like it hits a part of his tuxedo, and it gets cut off from the rest of his outfit, and it like transforms back into what it looked like before. Um, I think it might have been part of his tie, but anyway, Detective Calloway, who's being this very smart detective, starts kind of sniffing out Stanley, like, because something tells him that Stanley has something to do with this. Um, so later, Stanley, feeling kind of understandably freaked out. He ends up seeking help from this kind of very kooky psychiatrist, Doctor Newman, who's played by Ben Stein in this movie, and just all Ben Stein plays the same character and everything he's always in. Um, so Doctor Newman is obsessed with these like masks and stuff, and he believes that it might be kind of this that the mask that Stanley has might be this mythological like artifact of Loki, and that its powers are nighttime only. So he also kind of theorizes that the mask unleashes Stanley's like repressed desires, which um, are pretty wild if that's the truth. So Stanley as the mask ends up meeting Tina again, but Calloway kind of crashes the party once again and just cue another amazing mask escape involving this kind of Cuban Pete performance that he does. It's both insane and brilliant. But Peggy, ends up being this double crosser, and she betrays Stanley to Dorian for a huge amount of money, and and Dorian, who is kind of fueled by greed and he's very power hungry, he ends up taking the mask for himself and putting it on, and he becomes this kind of grotesque, evil version of the mask, and he ends up forcing Stanley to reveal the stolen money, and then frames him for everything, uh, and even leaving this fake rubber mask as evidence. Um, so just when things are looking the darkest that they can be for Stanley, Tina ends up proving that she's not just this pretty face, but she visits Stanley in jail and shows him genuine kindness and saying that the mask wasn't necessary for her to like him. And this kind of sparks something in Stanley, but Tina ends up getting kidnapped by Dorian, and he's planning to use her as part of his power play at this charity ball at the Coco Bongo, uh, which is hosted by this mob boss. Um, and this is where the movie I think hits the most because Dorian, who is this is the mask at this point, ends up murdering the mob boss Nico, and he plans to blow up this entire club. But Stanley's loyal dog Milo, and seriously, Milo is a star in his own right in this movie, um, ends up busting Stanley out of jail by stealing these keys from one of the guards. And Stanley, with Milo, at his side, ends up becoming the mask one last time as he gets the mask back to save Tina and the city. And that whole Coco Bongo finale is pure chaos and just pure fun. I mean, 'cause Stanley, he enlists Charlie's help, um, but gets captured, and Tina playing her own smart game kind of tricks Dorian into taking off the mask, and um, Milo, who's the hero dog and all this, puts on the mask himself and goes this kind of like full cartoon like full cartoon dog. I don't know how to describe that. And he just kind of goes off on all of Dorian's goons, and Stanley, like I said, he gets the mask back, and he disposes of the bomb just in the nick of time, and he defeats Dorian in this kind of most ridiculous, like hilarious way possible, and uh, and just sends him down this kind of fountain drain. I don't. I mean, it's just something you have to see to kind of understand. I know by me explaining that probably sounds like a lot of convoluted nonsense, uh, but there's a lot of that in Jim Carrey movies, especially The Mask. And as the end of the movie shows the cops arriving, and Dorian's thugs are busted, and Calloway is ready to arrest Stanley again, but bam, the mayor steps in, declares that Dorian was the mask, and he hails Stanley as this hero. So there's sort of some justice there, but hey, it's a cartoon world for these characters at this point. And the next day, Stanley, now confident, kind of cleared of all these charges, he goes back to this bridge where his journey, initially started with finding the mask. And he's there with Tina and Charlie and Milo. And in this kind of symbolic gesture, Tina throws the mask into the harbor, and she and Stanley share this kiss, and leave it to Milo to have the last laugh here as he jumps in and he swims away with the mask, and it just this movie I think ends perfectly on that note of who knows what crazy things could still happen because and there were some sequels. There were some sequels to The Mask as well. So, but we'll get into that just here in a minute. So, The Mask wasn't just a movie. I think it was just this brilliant idea to show Jim Carrey's true talent and to show that he is this real life human cartoon. And I mean, just there's nobody that could have pulled off this character for this movie better than what Jim Carrey did. And this is another instant where I think it really cemented Jim Carrey as a bona fide superstar. Um, it showed the world just how far visual effects could go in like blending live action with this kind of cartoonish animation, um, and just the quotable lines or catchphrases like "smoking" and "somebody stop me" and just all that stuff became instantly iconic, and or they're still quoted to this day, and it's just it. I think it influenced a whole generation of comedies and even comic book movies for that matter, proving that you could have these superhero esque powers with this really this healthy dose of like slapstick and dark humor, and you know another one that kind of came around, which it was like a very weird superhero movie, but it was called Blank Man that had Damon Wayans in it. And if you haven't seen that one, that's definitely one you guys should watch as well. Um, but The Mask is this really wild and visually inventive and just endlessly entertaining ride. I think it's a reminder. Oh, excuse me. It's a reminder that sometimes you just need to let loose of that inner wacky side that you have, and even if it involves a magical green mask. Uh, and if you haven't seen it, if you're if you're like me and you've seen it tons of times, um, this movie is definitely rewatchable time and time again. And it's just it's proof that Jim Carrey in this green makeup effect mask is just cinematic magic. I mean, it's it's amazing, guys. Um, but now moving on to the next movie, and this will be the third movie that Jim Carrey did just in the year 1994. Um, this is the movie that really started it all as far as his superstardom goes. Um, this is the one that really changed, I think, how comedies were looked at for the rest of the 90s. Um, because this one is a cinematic masterpiece as well. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I said it. This is a cinematic masterpiece. Um, and yeah, of course, this is Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. And as a diehard Jim Carrey fan, you know, uh, I'm just telling you, this movie is is hilarious. I mean, it's awesome. I mean, it's just it has so much, and it's before I get into it, I also want to say it's a movie with a lot of the humor that it has within the movie. Definitely may not fly in today's world of just how things are are looked at so politically and everything nowadays. It's don't think this one would this would fly in too many cases, but if you can look past all that, this movie is definitely one that you should not miss out on. It's another piece of just pure comedy gold to me, um, and so let's give credit where credit is due. So this movie uh, was brought to us from the brilliant mind of Tom Shadyac, who directed and co-wrote this movie alongside Jack Bernstein, and Jim Carrey even had a hand in writing this as well. I think he's uncredited for some of the rewrites, but you can definitely feel that he had some creative control on this movie. Um, and these guys, they knew exactly what they were doing when they unleashed this movie upon the world. I mean, um, so for the poor souls out there who have not seen Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, um, well, I'm not even going to give you the chance at this point because if you've not seen Ace Ventura, there's something wrong with you. So let me go ahead and paint you a picture of this movie. So uh, Miami is Miami is where this movie takes place, and this is where we meet Ace, who is this private investigator. Unlike any other private investigator that you've ever encountered. So you can forget your kind of suave trench coat wearing detectives. Ace is this kind of whirlwind of Hawaiian shirts and um, just gravity defying hair, just very bizarre noises that's always coming out of him, and he's operating out of this just very cluttered apartment, and but he's got a heart of gold when it comes to animals, and um, he specializes in rescuing these animals, and be it skunks or pigeons or whatever. He's constantly kind of battling to make his rent money, and just also getting the side eye all the time from this Lieutenant Einhorn, and also the entire Miami Police Department, who clearly think he's just he's insane, I guess. Um, but um, but when the mascot of the Miami Dolphins, which is Snowflake the dolphin, this actual bottlenose dolphin, um, ends up getting snatched just weeks before the Super Bowl. Uh, so who are the Dolphins going to call? Ghostbusters? Not in this case, but they're going to call Ace Ventura. So Melissa Robinson, who's played by Courtney Cox in this movie in one of her earlier roles, she is the Dolphins' kind of publicist, I guess, and so she hires Ace, and thus begins this kind of like wild adventure or investigation, if you will. So Ace has these very incredibly unique methods to where by diving into this case, and he's immediately on the trail, finding this kind of peculiar amber stone, which comes from a championship ring. He finds it in Snowflake's empty tank, and this leads him to kind of suspect that something is going on with somebody that has that stone from a championship ring. So he's thinking it's somebody within the actual football team that is, or a previous player of the football team that may be associated with Snowflake's capture. He's also kind of suspecting this very eccentric billionaire Ronald Camp, who's played by Udo Kier in this. Because his character is like this known collector of these exotic animals. So this kind of cues Ace to go on this, infiltration of camp, having this party at his home, and and this which turns out like Ace has to face off against this shark in this like swimming pool, and that scene alone is one of the best scenes in the entire movie. It's so funny, and it's very iconic too. I think because as he comes out of there and he's like completely drenched from being in that pool, and he's like, and all the attention from the party is on him. And he's like, "Do not go in there." Woo! And I just think that's a scene that just I think is iconic for that movie, and all the Ace Ventura fans know that one. Um, so while Ronald Camp turns out to be kind of a dead end in the terms of Snowflake, his one of his rings does match the stone, so and it gives Ace this kind of crucial clue. So um, Ace then deduces that the stone, like I said, is from this 1984 AFC Championship ring. So it points to like a member of the 1984 Dolphins team. So Ace he embarks on this kind of side-splitting quest to investigate every single player that was on that team in that year, and just even kind of awkwardly corner them in like locker rooms and on a track, like a running track, and just one was at a urinal in a bathroom. I mean, just but my last ever ring is accounted for. So then things start to take a darker turn. So Roger Podacter, who is the Dolphins head of operations, ends up being found dead. And the police are quick to kind of label it a suicide, but Ace, is not convinced, and he kind of has this knack for sniffing out the truth, and he feels that something fishy is going on here. You know what I mean? And so he ends up proving that Predator was murdered instead of committing suicide in this kind of hilarious theatrical reenactment. And this breakthrough ends up leading him to a guy named Ray Finkel, who is a name that will, I think, forever be synonymous with this comedic sports tragedy. So Ray Finkel is this disgraced kind of former Dolphins kicker who choked under pressure in the 1984 Super Bowl. And he is now a prime suspect, especially after Ace uncovers that Finkel was committed for these violent tendencies. Right after his career imploded. And then right after this, Dan Marino, the quarterback for the Dolphins, is then kidnapped. And revenge is clearly brewing here, and Ace knows that Finkel is somehow behind it all. Um, I think perhaps one of the most brilliantly bizarre undercover operations in cinematic history, Ace infiltrates his psychiatric facility disguised as his patient, and this scene is awesome. It's one of the best scenes in the movie, and and just amongst all these kind of eccentric patients and at this facility, Ace he finds there's this crucial like newspaper clipping about Lieutenant Einhorn, who is described as this missing hiker, and her body was never found. So this kind of light bulb goes off in Ace's head, and he gets his little pal Emilio, who's played by Tone Loc in this movie, to do some snooping, and kind of uncovers this passionate love letter from Podacter to Einhorn. So bingo, so that shows that Einhorn is now connected to Podacter's murder in some way. So with the help of his apartment, I guess full of animal informants, because who needs human witnesses when you have a raccoon, right? Um, Ace puts these final pieces together, and here comes the legendary reveal of this movie. So, Lieutenant Lois Einhorn is Ray Finkel, and just in this kind of transgender disguise. But and yeah, it's outrageous. It's over the top, but I think it's sheer brilliance when it comes to this story and Ace Ventura. Um, so the Super Bowl, is looming. It's getting ready to happen, and tension is mounting here, and Ace ends up confronting uh, Lieutenant Einhorn, who's also Ray Finkel at this point that we know, at this kind of yacht storage facility where Dan Marino and Snowflake are there being held hostage. And this whole showdown is epic, and it culminates in Ace's kind of public exposure of Einhorn slash Finkel, and just that true identity, that she has, or she has, whichever you want to prefer in this case, and just her whole the murder of Podacter, of Roger Podacter. So justice is served here, and Einhorn slash Finkel is arrested, and after this kind of glorious, like very messy brawl, the day is saved. Um, but that whole peak of Ace's, heroism, it's at halftime of the Super Bowl. So Marino and Snowflake are reunited with the cheering crowds, and Ace is hailed as this hero on the jumbotron. And because Ace can't resist a little extra animal related drama, he kind of gets this hilarious scuffle with the Philadelphia Eagles mascot over this rare pigeon that Ace had been chasing after throughout the whole movie, as well as a kind of a subplot. And so only Ace Ventura could turn mascot on mascot violence into a heartwarming moment, I think. But yeah, that's how the movie ends. And one thing about that I've always been weird to me is like when the Philadelphia Eagles mascot comes over there and ends up scaring away the pigeon before him and Ace get into the fight. Um, you clearly see, this is the Dolphins side of the field. Why is the Philadelphia Eagles mascot on the same side as the Dolphins team? So that's definitely a plot hole. But Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, I think, was, like I said earlier, definitely a shift in how comedy was portrayed, in movies in the '90s, and it's the one that started it all for Jim Carrey's superstardom, and just really solidified him as this this rubber faced, you know completely bonkers comedian that everybody loved, and just all these catchphrases, alrighty then, and just who's there, just all that stuff definitely just became, I think, iconic. And is another one of those things, like many Jim Carrey movies are. They're still quoted today, and just as I've stated many times, this movie just paved the way for a lot of high energy and goofy comedies, throughout the '90s, and it also spawned a sequel, which I'll be talking about next, and also an animated series, and just made Ace Ventura this very beloved character, and in pop culture, and you see references to it like everywhere, from Halloween costumes to internet memes. There's all kinds of stuff, and you know while some aspects of the film, particularly like the transgender reveal, are viewed very differently today, and have sparked kind of discussions about representation and just sensitivity, and I think rightfully so, because times change, and our everybody's understanding evolves. But I think it's undeniable that Ace Ventura: Pet Detective remains a hugely influential comedy. Um, it's a testament, I think, to Jim Carrey's, comedic genius, that sheer absurdity of the plot, and just the that film's kind of unapologetic commitment to being so outrageously funny. Um, so I mean, if you're looking for a movie, that will make you, just okay, it's another one of those movies where you just turn your brain off for a while and just sit back and just be entertained, and have these lines that you can quote for days, and just maybe even inspire you to start talking to animals. I don't know, but Ace Ventura: Pet Detective is just is an amazing comedy from the '90s, and it's very wonderful and just very unforgettable. Um, so yeah, so that's Ace Ventura, and so moving on, let's go. Since we talked about the first movie, let's go ahead and talk about the sequel. So, Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls came out a year later in 1995, and this movie is, out of the two Ace Ventura movies, this one's probably my favorite. Um, and just like I said, as a diehard fan of Jim Carrey, especially the whole world of Ace Ventura, um, this movie is possibly even funnier than the original. Um, so so if you're ready to kind of embrace the ludicrous, like the outlandish, just downright hilarious, this movie is definitely a spirit animal for some, so to speak. Um, so this movie was directed by Steve Odekirk, and if you're not familiar with Steve Odekirk, um, he is. I think he worked on Tim and Eric, the awesome show from Adult Swim. He did. There's a movie he did called Kung Pao Enter the Fist, which is just a hilarious spoof take on these like martial arts films from the '70s. But he directed Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, and he also, I think, he co-wrote the screenplay as well for this with Jack Bernstein. And they developed these characters together and all that as well. But this movie, I think captures the exact same kind of zany energy that made the original such a phenomenon. And Odekirk, I think he really understood the core of Ace's appeal, with that whole physical comedy and just the ridiculous voices and um, just that commitment, to being so unapologetically weird. Um, but he doesn't just replicate the formula; he amplifies it, and he takes Ace to this whole new continent and just like this whole new level of absurdity. And Bernstein and Odekirk's writing for this movie is very witty and just perfectly, I think, tailored to Carrey's kind of unique brand of comedic brilliance. So they definitely understood, that Ace isn't just about solving cases. He's about this very pure, unadulterated, like comedic performance. Um, and So let's go ahead and dive into this movie. And we pick up where we left off, with our beloved pet detective in, well, he's in more of a kind of a spiritual place now, I guess. After this very truly heart wrenching, and I hate this opening scene. Well, I love it, but I also hate it too because of what happens with the raccoon, and because when he's uh, Ace is involved in this incident where he's trying to rescue this raccoon, and it's used as a parody of Cliffhanger in this scene. But I don't know. I don't. I hate the whole part with the raccoon. It bothers me for some reason. I know it's just a movie, but whatever. So in this case, Ace is devastated, and so he hangs up his Hawaiian shirts and his leather pants for this monk's robe, and he's seeking solace and enlightenment in this monastery. And seriously, Jim Carrey in a monastery is just comedy gold in itself. Before the movie even truly starts, um, but Destiny, I think has other plans for Ace here as um, this. Hold on, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, but anyway, there's this guy named Fulton Greenwald who's played by I think it's his name. I may be getting his name wrong, but it's the guy that's with Ace. That is the guy that comes and gets him from the monastery. He shows up with this, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, but he's asking Ace for help because you know there's this animal. He doesn't tell him right away what the animal is, but he just it's an animal that's seen as a god to this village. Um, and he's asking Ace to kind of it's gone missing, so he's asking Ace to come and try to find it for him. So he just he's clearly at his wits end, with Ace's kind of unique approach to this this monastery life now, and you know he just basically tries to get him to come on and just convince him to come and take this mission, even though Ace doesn't want to do it at first because he says he's changed his life. But the leader of this monastery is like quick to kind of push him out the door, and declaring that he's now enlightened and he's ready for a new mission. Um, so this mission ends up being to find Shikaka, which is this sacred white bat of the G.O.A.T tribe. And this bat is kind of a big deal, I guess. It's supposed to be like this symbol of peace between the G.O.A.T and the other tribe, the Wachatu, the Wachutu, and it's the whole disappearance of Shikaka um, threatens to ignite this whole full blown tribal war, which is something that nobody wants. Especially not the folks that are you know profiting from this lucrative guano, which is batshit, uh, and just that whole trade in that region. So Ace, despite his kind of intense and completely justified, fear of bats. Um, he's thrust into these jungles of Africa, and he arrives in Libya, meets this kind of hilariously stiff and suspicious Vincent Cadby, who is just was one of the perfect villains for this movie, and from there things just kind of spiral into this glorious like chaos in the movie, and Ace's investigation is just a master class in physical comedy and outrageous just character work, and he's battling not just a missing bat, but also he's kind of crippling fear of bats, and just the just this escalating tension between the two tribes, and just this kind of all these unwanted advances from the Wachati princess. Um, and so Ace, ever the professional, well, sort of, politely but firmly turns down the princess's advances, and citing that his oath to celibacy, um, which is a line that's delivered with this like pure deadpan Jim Carrey perfection. Um, he also ends up befriending the prince, um, who is kind of just this help to Ace, despite his kind of initial suspicion, kind of creating this very delightful buddy dynamic. So Ace's suspicion, falls, I think, squarely on the Wachatu medicine man, which is played by Tommy Davidson, also from In Living Color fame. And this leads to this kind of ill-fated infiltration of this village. So this is where a lot of one of the most hilarious scenes in the movie happens. So Ace is captured by the Wachutu, and Ace is mistaken for this Quincy Ocha, which is translated to White Devil, and he's subjected to this kind of series of these outlandish challenges to prove his worth, so they don't kill him. Um, and this is where they're like fighting on this like river log, and there's like a challenge where they walk over like a bed of coals, and then it ends up the final challenge is this like um, Wachutu tribe like uh, battle to the death almost. Um, and just all of these are performed by Jim Carrey with that signature rubber face, like just that absolutely brilliant physical comedy. That he just puts his whole body becomes a character, um, and just the whole circle of death fight against um, the character that Tommy Davidson plays is definitely a highlight. And it's just kind of this blend of surprisingly like impressive fight choreography and just ridiculous comedic antics as well. Um, so even in defeat, Ace's kind of sheer unadulterated weirdness, wins over the Wachutu crowd, and and he ends up being released, about with this kind of playful parting dart to the backside, um, and and that dart ends up being the key because the moment Ace realizes that the Wachutu darts are different from the tranquilizer dart that he'd been shot with earlier in the film, is kind of a classic Ace Ventura aha moment, and it leads him to the real culprits, which is a pair of these poachers who end up having Shikaka, the bat, and are they're clearly working for someone bigger. So they end up they tranquilize Ace again, and then they tie him to this raft and they send him plummeting over this waterfall. And this is where I think lesser comedies would usually lose steam, but um, Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, it just keeps escalating. So Ace, of course, survives the waterfall, and he's Ace Ventura after all. Of course, he's going to survive. He's the main character, um, and just in this moment of like kind of pure comedic genius, um, he consults the monster leader in this kind of spiritual projection, and this is this is the part where the movie really embraces just that whole ridiculous nature at every turn. Um, so the monastery leader, kind of surprisingly helpful this time, guides Ace to the truth. Um, and so it ends up, this was Cadby all along, and just the seemingly kind of helpful console is revealed to be this mastermind, wanting to ignite a tribal war to control the like the guano market. Uh, so he even hired Ace as a patsy, which is a you know this perfect kind of comedic alibi. So the confrontation scene back at the mansion is another I think masterpiece is over the top comedy. So Ace's escape from custody, aided by all these different jungle creatures. It's just pure kind of cartoon logic brought to life, and just the chase scene with Ace in a monster truck versus Cadby. I think that's his. I keep saying it, but now I think I got it mixed up with another character in the movie. I forget because I always get those two guys mixed up. But if you've seen the movie, you know who I'm talking about. So he's like in this, you know, it's like Rover vehicle, and it's just that whole scene with the monster truck and Ace and all is just very ridiculous. And the payoff of Ace crushing his car is just is so hilarious. I love it. But finally, Ace ends up returning to Chicago just as his war is about to erupt. And these tribes are united, and then just the grand finale with Cabby or whatever his name is. I can't remember if it's the same guy I'm trying to think of. He flees through the jungle right into the arms of this gorilla who's in their mating season, and mistakes him for a mate. And this is just kind of perfect, I think, absurd poetic justice for you know for such kind of a cartoonish villainous character. Um, and in this kind of final hilarious twist, the peace ceremony is interrupted by the revelation that the Wachati princess is no longer a virgin, thanks to Ace. And even though he had turned down her advances, the mere implication of a romantic encounter, I think, is enough to almost reignite that war. But in this true Ace Ventura style, peace is achieved anyway, just with both tribes now united in trying to kill Ace. And that's how the movie ends. And like I said, this one had just as um, clever of comedy as the original, and just some of the jokes in this one I enjoy so much more than the original. Um, and there's a lot more quotable stuff in this one to me, like the whole Bumblebee tuna scene and the Bumblebee tuna. Excuse me, your balls are showing, and just that's something that's another thing that I've always just like quoted for years. I don't know what it is. It's something stupid in me that wants to quote just these very ignorant lines, but they're brilliant to me. Um, and this movie is another instant where Jim Carrey's status as this kind of comedic titan is definitely cemented in his career, and um, just cemented that character even further of Ace Ventura as this icon. Um, just the lines in this movie, I think they're a lot of it are ingrained in just pop culture, and it's another movie just that has influenced countless comedies, I think, that followed, and just proven that just that embracing absurdity and kind of physical comedy, all that can be very successful. Um, but beyond all the quotability and stuff that this movie has, the Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls is just pure fun, and it's a reminder that sometimes you just need to kind of switch off your brain and just have fun. I mean, I don't know any other way to put that. Um, it's it's definitely a celebration, I think, of Jim Carrey's kind of unique genius and just his ability to take himself and transform himself into this like living cartoon character and just bring joy to millions of people. Uh, and so if you're an Ace Ventura fan, I mean, if you love Jim Carrey, you appreciate comedy, as much as I do. And you're just not afraid to be completely bonkers, or watch something that's completely bonkers. And I think Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls is definitely an absolute must watch. Um, it's just I think it's even bigger and bolder than the original. So this yeah, definitely check this one out. If you've seen the original Ace Ventura but you've not seen When Nature Calls, definitely check this movie out. You definitely won't regret it. Um, so the last movie I'm going to be talking about, um, initially this or originally this movie was not on my list to watch this week. Um, but after the death of Val Kilmer earlier this week, I decided to add this on as a last minute thing, and so I went ahead and watched it. Um, After I had watched Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, so I thought I was, that was going to be my whole first episode was just those four movies. But with the death of Val Kilmer, I definitely wanted to watch this one and talk about this one because it just kind of ties in with Jim Carrey being involved in this movie as the Riddler. I thought I could use this as both a tribute to Jim Carrey and Val Kilmer. Um, so let's go ahead and talk about this. So, Batman Forever from 1995 came out the same year as Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, um, which both movies ironically have to do with a bat. So, let's go ahead and talk about this movie. So, I'm, not only am I a diehard fan of Jim Carrey, but I'm also a diehard fan of the Dark Knight himself, Batman, and just the incredible talents that's showcased here in Batman Forever from both Jim Carrey and Val Kilmer. Um, it makes it for this very pure, you know, Gotham goodness um, Batman movie. And a lot of people like to say that this movie is corny, it's cheesy. They like to shit on it a lot. But you know what? Forget all those naysayers, man. Because Batman Forever, to me, is a super fun movie. I mean, it is like it showcases like a comic book truly come to life, um, and just you know, it's like I said, it's just definitely fun, and 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 we were supposed to originally got Tim Burton to work on this movie. So instead, we got Tim Burton still produced this one, but instead of directing, we got Joel Schumacher. Now, I know some folks also have kind of opinions on Schumacher's vision with this movie, and also with Batman and Robin. But I like Joel Schumacher. He did the Lost Boys back in the '80s, which is one of the greatest vampire movies of all time. And but a lot of people just look at this movie and compare it to like the Tim Burton's gothic masterpieces that he did with Batman from 1989 and Batman Returns. But I think Joel Schumacher definitely brought his own kind of unique flair to this movie, and it's almost very like this operatic energy in into Gotham. And I think he understood that the Batman stories can be larger than life, and he embraced that I think with open arms and just this whole um, this 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 I don't know. I mean, like I really don't know how to even explain it. Like it's but he really just I think he took the idea of this movie um, and kind of just combined it with the aspects of a comic book, and he just and a whole lot of neon as well, I guess. But it to me it worked. I mean, I was a kid when this movie came out. I was maybe 9 years old or something when this movie came out. And I just remember loving it. And I've always have loved it. And it may be just a nostalgic thing for me, but I just know that this movie was huge. It was very successful when it came out, and there was tons of merchandising everywhere for this movie. And the screenplay for this movie was I think was just we got this story that really was visually like dazzling. Also kind of delved into the psychological depth of Bruce Wayne and just and his and the villains that's represented here, which kind of makes it more than just your ordinary punch 'em up superhero movie. And from the get go, I think Batman Forever it throws you right into the heart of this Gotham chaos, and we open up the movie with with Batman, who's now embodied by this kind of brooding um, portrayal from Val Kilmer, and he's facing off against this, uh, which is probably my favorite Batman villain, Two Face. Also formerly the district attorney Harvey Dent, and Tommy Lee Jones takes on this role with a very manic energy, like perfectly capturing that split personality and the coin flip driven madness from Two Face, and we see flashes in the movie of Harvey's past and just the horrific acid attack orchestrated that that shattered his face and mind, and Batman has this guilt over failing to save Harvey, and that hangs heavy on him, and it kind of sets this tone of this like personal responsibility that echoes throughout the film. But then we enter Edward Nigma, the eccentric, and let's be honest, he's very captivating in this film as a character, and he's this researcher at Wayne Enterprises, and he's played by the one and only Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey ends up becoming the Riddler in this film. Um, and you can kind of forget subtle, like Carrey, he goes full throttle, just this, just whirlwind of like manic energy, and just green spandex, and just we get introduced to his character of Edward Nigma as this brilliant but like socially awkward inventor that's obsessed with Bruce Wayne's approval, and so he unveils this invention of that's like a brainwave manipulating device, which he calls the box, and it's a device to Edward that screams potential for both brilliance and terror, and Bruce, who is perfectly played by Val Kilmer, I think, is this man wrestling with his own demons and just his kind of desire for normalcy. He rejects the device out of like ethical concerns, because he doesn't, he wants people to be able to think for themselves, and they're not have their minds manipulated, and um, you know he also just rejects it because Edward is just kind of he's Edward. So um, the rejection here is this kind of catalyst for Edward Nigma's transformation into the Riddler, and so he ends up killing his boss in this kind of brilliantly staged suicide, and and he leaves Wayne Enterprises armed with this kind of burning desire for revenge and just this kind of newfound love for riddles, and he begins taunting Bruce with these kind of cryptic clues, um, clearly like kind of relishing the mental game here. So then enter Dr. Chase Meridian, who's played by Nicole Kidman, and she's this criminal psychologist who's played with intelligence and charm, and she's immediately intrigued by both Bruce Wayne and Batman, and so she ends up diagnosing Enigma as clearly being psychotic, um, but also senses these kind of complexities beneath Bruce's billionaire playboy facade. Um, so the chemistry between Val Kilmer and Nicole Kidman in this is fantastic, and I think it adds definitely this layer of romantic intrigue to the whole superhero action as well. Um, and the circus scene where Bruce and uh, Chase Meridian they go to the circus together, and there's this whole circus scene is iconic, I think, for the film and heartbreaking at the same time. Um, so Two Face, who is this master of chaotic entrances, crashes the party at the circus, and takes everyone hostage, and demands that Batman reveal his identity. And in this kind of moment of this pure heart-stopping heroism, the the Flying Graysons are trying to stop um, this whole like attack from Two Face and his goons. And the youngest of the Flying Graysons, Dick Grayson, manages to take Two Face's bomb and hurl it into the river. Saving countless lives in the process, but ends up, tragically losing his entire family to Two Face in the process. Um, so this scene is very powerfully emotional, I think, and I think it showcases both the heroism and just the devastating consequences, of the villain's actions in this case. So Bruce, who is kind of forever burdened by the loss of his own parents, he takes Dick Grayson, who is now orphaned pretty much, and brings him into Wayne Manor. And Chris O'Donnell plays Dick Grayson with just a perfect blend of like grief and anger and kind of, I don't know, like burgeoning like heroism, I guess. So Dick Grayson quickly deduces, Bruce's kind of dual identity as Batman, adding this kind of fresh dynamic to Bruce's lonely world, and he's fueled by vengeance. So Dick Grayson is eager to to join Batman's crusade, wanting to hunt down Two Face, but Bruce, who is weary of this kind of endless cycle of violence, and just he's also contemplating retirement. He resists from all this, and he wants to help Dick Grayson heal, but not become kind of consumed by this darkness that's haunted his own life, because of how he lost his parents so many years ago. So, meanwhile, Edward Nigma is fully embraced his Riddler persona, and he's joined forces with Two Face, and I mean they're a very very intriguing duo in this, and so they kind of embark on this crime spree to fund Edward Nigma's sinister plan, which is mass producing the box. And this device, as we see, not only broadcasts TV signals directly into people's minds, but it's also stealing information from them and feeding it directly into Nigma, making his brain more and more powerful, and progressively smarter over time, and just even more unhinged as well. I mean, just so um, Edward ends up having this party, and this is where Batman and Two Face, they come to clash again, and this time ends up being Dick Grayson, who, in this kind of moment of unexpected bravery, saves Batman's life. And just this event solidifies that bond between Bruce and Dick Grayson, and and just really foreshadows, Dick's inevitable path to becoming Robin. Um, so the romantic tension between Bruce and Chase deepens as well, and Chase, who is this brilliant psychologist, sees beyond the mask and falls for both Bruce and Batman. And she eventually confesses her love, and in a rather bold move for a psychologist, figuring out, or maybe Bruce just kind of subtly confirms it. You can look at it either way. His secret identity to her, and however, Edward, now truly a master of this stolen knowledge, uses his box technology to uncover Batman's secret too. So on Halloween night, the Riddler and Two Face they set up this plan to where they infiltrate uh, Wayne Manor, and they find the Batcave and they destroy the Batcave, which is and Bruce gets shot and Chase gets kidnapped. So there's a whole lot of shit going on Halloween night at Wayne Manor. Um, but Bruce, who's down but not out, and he has the unwavering support from Alfred, um, pieces together, the Riddler's identity and his whole master plan. And this is where Brutally truly accepts, Dick Grayson not just as a ward, but as a partner, and welcomes him uh, as Robin. So the dynamic duo is finally formed here, um, and they're ready to take on this combined might of the Riddler and Two Face. And the ending here, is at Riddler's lair, and this is just it's classic Batman brilliance in my opinion. So Robin, who has shown this kind of very incredible growth and control, confronts Two Face, but ultimately chooses to show him mercy, which I think is a crucial moment that really highlights that budding heroic nature um, from Robin. And however, Two Face, who's kind of cunning as ever, overpowers Robin, and the Riddler unveils his final cruel riddle, which is Chase and Robin are suspended above this like deadly drop, and they're both trapped in these separate tubes, and it represents kind of like that dual nature of Batman himself, where the Riddler forces Batman to choose Chase, who represents Bruce Wayne's humanity and that desire for love, or Robin, who represents Batman's drive and commitment to fighting crime. Um, but Batman, he's the master strategist, and he outsmarts the Riddler with this kind of riddle of his own, distracting him just long enough to hurl this batarang at the Riddler's like brainwave receiver or whatever you want to call it. So this this causes the Riddler to scramble his own mind, and it's kind of fitting in a very in a way. Um, but Batman realizes the floor is an optical illusion and saves both Chase and Robin, and Two Face in a final kind of chaotic act. Corners them, flipping his coin to decide their fate. But Batman, in this kind of moment of brilliant improvisation, throws a handful of identical coins into the air, which overwhelms Two Face's kind of coin driven logic, and sends him plummeting to his own death. And just in the aftermath, we see the Riddler, who's now completely delusional, and he gets committed to Arkham Asylum, proclaiming himself to be Batman, which is a kind of darkly comedic end to his kind of intellectual pride. Um, so Bruce, having confronted his inner demons, embraces this partnership and reaffirms his kind of commitment to Gotham, and so continues his crusade as Batman, and now with Robin by his side, and I think it's a very awesome ending because it just shows that growth and resilience in both Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson. Um, and this movie, like I said, it always gets, I think, unfairly lumped into discussions about bad superhero movies, but I wholeheartedly, I love this movie. I wholeheartedly disagree with all those people, saying this is a bad superhero movie. I mean, you got to look at it when it came out. It was a product of its time, which is a mid '90s, superhero spectacle that kind of embraced that very vibrant comic book aesthetic. And I just think the impact that it's made is undeniable. Um, I think it effectively bridges the gap between Tim Burton's kind of darker and edgier gothic you know Batman films and the more kind of overtly comic booky adaptations that would follow. Um, it I think it definitely retained that whole psychological exploration of Bruce Wayne that's established in Burton's films, but kind of dialed up the action and the whole the whole visuals. And speaking of visuals, like the whole visual style here from Schumacher, and his his perception of Gotham and this whole neon drenched gothic wonderland, I think that the set design and the costumes and just the lighting and everything here is just very bold and very theatrical, and it just really created this very unique visual identity for Gotham that while it's different from Burton's, it's still I think instantly recognizable and iconic in its own right. Um, and the Batmobile in this, I think, is one of the coolest looking Batmobiles that there's ever been. Um, and it's up there as definitely one of my top favorite Batmobiles. Um, and Jim Carrey is the Riddler in this. So let's be honest. I mean, he sets the bar for the over the top, theatrical villain performances in superhero movies. I think he's the best Riddler. To me, he is the best. And I know that Robin Williams was also considered for the role of the Riddler in for this movie, but I think Jim Carrey was perfect. I think that he was perfect for this. Just the whole his energy, along with the riddles, and just you know, his sheer commitment to the role is very captivating to me. And I just think that he perfectly captured, the Riddler's kind of manic intellect and that whole theatrical flair. Yeah, just I couldn't see anybody other than Jim Carrey in that role for this particular movie. And to me, he's the best Riddler of all time. And then Val Kilmer, of course, I got to talk about Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer's portrayal of Batman slash Bruce Wayne. Um, Val Kilmer brought a different kind of intensity to Batman. I thought um, he portrayed Bruce Wayne as this kind of deeply, conflicted individual who struggles with guilt and loneliness and just this desire for a normal life. Um, and this his performance here is very nuanced and just often I think underrated because I believe that he adds a crucial layer of like emotional depth to the film. Um, and then we got the introduction of Robin in this. So Batman Forever, and its introduction of Robin is in a serious way since the whole campy's '60s series. It laid the groundwork for the dynamic duo with this film, and I think it explored Dick Grayson's kind of origin story in a way that resonated with fans of the comics. And this movie was definitely a box office success. I mean, it was, there's a lot of critical reception, over time with this film, but Batman Forever was a massive box office hit. I think it revitalized the Batman franchise. Um, After it had been a few years since Batman Returns had come out, and then, just I think this really paved the way for future superhero blockbusters, and it just proved that audiences were hungry, for these big visually exciting superhero adventures, and while it might not be as dark and gritty as some of the more modern Batman iterations, Batman Forever offers a different kind of superhero experience. and it's one that's bursting with energy and color, and just I think undeniable star power is featured here in this movie. It's a film that I think definitely understands that whole Batman universe, and just kind of reveals in it. But for fans, of Jim Carrey's manic genius, or Val Kilmer's brooding charm, and just a Batman story that I personally feel is both thrilling and just very interesting. Um, Batman Forever, I think, will forever be entertaining to me. And I just think that a lot of people need to give this movie another watch and just kind of like look at it from a different perspective. And, you might just find yourself, being a little bit entertained. Um, but, um, but yeah, guys, I guess that is it for this video. I, and this was just it for part one. So part two will be this Sunday. So definitely be check out. If you enjoyed this video, um, well, first of all, I just want to thank you guys for checking out this video to begin with, and I just appreciate you guys more than you know. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out part two on Sunday to hear me talk about five more Jim Carrey movies. And just again, I just appreciate all of you for checking this video out. Um, and I want to thank everyone who is watching this on replay, or for those that were in the chat tonight, like my buddies Daniel and Brandon. Um, so thank you guys for just talking a little bit in the chat tonight. But definitely drop me a comment below on what your favorite of these five Jim Carrey movies are, or who your favorite Jim Carrey character is, or and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I'd really appreciate that. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button to catch more videos from me like this one, and just click that bell for any kind of future notifications as well. So, with all that said, I'm Crater. This is CraterMania. I love you guys, and have a good night.